I vividly remember the day I first drove into Crystal Brook Shores, a picturesque suburban enclave nestled around a shimmering reservoir. The tree-lined avenues, neatly trimmed lawns, and bright cottage-style homes painted a welcoming portrait of American suburban life. My new job position allowed remote work, so I hoped for peaceful days in this tranquil community. I was also eager to live near water, as I was the newly appointed director of the National Water Safety Administration, though I preferred to keep that role out of the public eye. A gracefully arched sign greeted all newcomers at the entrance. Crystal Brook Shores, where nature and community flow together. Everything seemed idyllic, until I began hearing whispers about the local homeowners association. Residents muttered about a single figure who wielded more power than even the board's president. Her name was Brenda Farnan, though practically everyone cynically called her Karen behind her back. She was a 50-something woman, with meticulously styled hair, always carrying a leather-bound notebook. The caretaker at the property management office warned me gently, "Be mindful of Karen. She runs our HOA finances and compliance. She's unstoppable when she sees something she dislikes." At the time, I assumed that meant standard HOA pettiness, complaints about lawn gnomes or unapproved paint colors. I didn't suspect that beneath the manicured veneer of Crystal Brook Shores, Karen harbored a deep, simmering hostility that would soon escalate far beyond typical neighborly squabbles. Indeed, her overreaching quest for control would lead her to commit a heinous act, contaminating the very water we all depended on, unaware that I happened to be the top federal official overseeing water safety across the country. Crystal Brook Shores took pride in its reservoir and community well system. While larger cities connected to municipal water lines, this neighborhood had its own well, drawing from the crystal-clear aquifer below the reservoir. The water tasted incredibly pure, a selling point for prospective buyers. Many neighbors boasted that they never needed filtration systems. "It's some of the cleanest water in the region," they'd say. Such self-sufficiency intrigued me. In my official capacity, I often dealt with complex municipal water utilities, but here was a small-scale system, practically under the HOA's domain. A local well maintenance firm tested the water monthly, ensuring no contamination. The clean track record helped me choose a house here. Even so, I intended to keep tabs on the system, if only out of professional curiosity. Meanwhile, over casual conversations with neighbors, I caught wind that Karen disliked the reservoir. She regarded it as an eyesore during winter's low water levels, grumbling about how it drew outsiders who fished along the banks. Some residents shrugged off her complaints, seeing the reservoir as a gift of nature. Kayakers paddled on it at dawn, families strolled its perimeter. Karen, though, apparently wanted more exclusive control or even to develop it for something else. They joked about Karen building a fence around the entire shoreline if she could. I found the situation puzzling. A desire to fence off or drastically alter the reservoir seemed at odds with the community's name and brand. But for an HOA official to actively resent the water system fueling the neighborhood, that felt ominous. Still, I never suspected she'd go to extremes. Not yet. A week after moving in, I encountered Karen for the first time in person. She stepped out of a golf cart near my driveway, wearing a pastel blouse embroidered with the Crystal Brook Shores HOA logo. Her eyes scanned my property with a critical air. I was watering the flowers I'd planted, drawn, ironically, from the same well system that served all of us. Karen approached, planting herself near the mailbox. "I'm Brenda Farnan," she said, "though folks call me Karen, treasurer of the HOA, and I keep track of compliance. I see you're new. Did you receive our covenant handbook?" I nodded politely. "Yes, I have it. I'm Lisa Hale. Nice to meet you." Of course, not disclosing I was the National Water Safety Director, going by an alias for day-to-day life. I wanted to maintain some anonymity. Karen's lips quirked in a thin smile. "I trust you'll keep your yard tidy and follow all guidelines. We have strict standards about water usage, especially from that well." She sniffed. "We can't have folks overusing the water supply. Some in this neighborhood wasted on trivial tasks." I forced a mild smile. "I'll be mindful. I'm used to being careful with water resources." A slight understatement. My entire career revolved around protecting them. Karen eyed me, then nodded. "Good. We run a tight ship here. I'd hate to see you get on the wrong side of our rules." Then she marched off, leaving me unsettled by her warning. Nothing I'd done warranted that tone, so I suspected her control streak extended to water usage as well. Over the following weeks, small incidents hinted at Karen's friction with neighbors. She posted notices scolding families who let kids splash in the reservoir's shallows, claiming it was dangerous. She scolded older residents who left sprinklers on for more than an hour. Some folks grumbled about random water usage fines that Karen single-handedly imposed through the HOA. While official board members expressed discomfort, they rarely overruled her. She was too entrenched, they said. At the same time, I quietly kept track of the well's monthly testing results. The local firm's reports, posted on the HOA website, remained normal, no contaminants, good pH balance. That was consistent with the reservoir's track record of pristine quality. But a friend I'd made, Mark, who served on the water maintenance committee, confided that Karen pestered them incessantly about restricting usage or limiting public access to the reservoir. She says it's a liability and we should fence it off, Mark said, rolling his eyes. I found her attitude perplexing. A quiet, stable community reliant on its own well seemed like a point of pride, yet Karen insisted it was a nuisance. But aside from petty harassment, I saw no sign she'd do anything radical. Certainly not sabotage. Why would someone sabotage their own water? That would be self-destructive. Or so I thought, underestimating the extremes a controlling HOA official might go to in order to dominate her environment. One sunny Saturday, the entire neighborhood buzzed with news that a few households reported strange odors in their tap water. The local well maintenance firm arrived to run tests. They found minor fluctuations in chemical readings, but not enough to declare it unsafe. The water's usual clarity seemed unaffected. Still, some families felt uneasy, especially those with small children or pets. People began posting on social media, speculating if the reservoir's water level changes or a shift in the aquifer might be the cause. Karen publicly dismissed the concerns, calling them overreactions. She posted in the HOA newsletter that the water remained totally fine, and that some folks are just too paranoid. That reassurance mollified some, though it felt abrupt. Others wanted a second opinion from city or state water officials. But Karen had long insisted that bringing in outside agencies threatened the HOA's independence. During an informal gathering, Mark admitted he'd seen unusual footprints near the well's pump house at odd hours. Could be a random trespasser, he said. But it's weird. I told Karen about it, and she shrugged, said not to worry. Something about her dismissive stance struck me as suspicious. Why discourage deeper investigation? Sensing a potential threat, I discreetly arranged for a separate private lab test of water samples from my own tap. In my official capacity, I had resources to expedite analysis. This was just in case the local firm overlooked something or was pressured by Karen. If a contamination was present, I wanted to know quickly. Meanwhile, life in the neighborhood continued, but an undercurrent of anxiety simmered. Within days, a disturbing pattern emerged. Several residents complained of stomach upsets, rashes, or mild fevers. At first, it was chalked up to the seasonal flu or random food poisoning. But the complaints mounted. Pets, too, fell ill, dogs vomiting, cats refusing to eat. The local veterinarian mentioned some folks in the area bringing in sick animals with no clear diagnosis. Suspicion grew that the water might be contaminated. Mark told me about an elderly couple who suspected the tap water was causing them diarrhea. Another neighbor's child had a persistent rash after bathing. No one had conclusive proof, but the coincidence was alarming. I checked with the private lab I'd used, asking if they'd completed my sample test. They said it would be ready soon. Karen, however, ramped up her usual approach. Dismiss, deflect, accuse others of hysteria. In an HOA bulletin, she wrote, "Stop panicking about water. We have a top-notch system. If you're sick, see a doctor, but don't spread rumors harming our community's reputation." She also criticized outsiders trying to undermine our autonomy, a thinly veiled jab at me or anyone wanting external water experts. It was around this time that I realized, if Karen was behind any deliberate contamination, she must be doing it in a manner that left minimal immediate traces. Or maybe she was punishing specific neighbors who defied her. Indeed, some who had fallen ill had been openly critical of Karen's harassment. This horrifying possibility chilled me. Poisoning water is beyond petty sabotage. But how to prove it? I needed the lab results, and soon. Finally, the private lab emailed me their preliminary findings. They detected unusual chemical markers in my water sample, specifically compounds consistent with low-level industrial solvents and a mild, but potentially harmful bacterium not typically found in our region. It wasn't enough to produce an immediate odor or taste for everyone, but it could absolutely cause digestive issues, especially in vulnerable individuals or pets. The lab recommended an urgent investigation. My blood turned cold. This was no natural fluctuation. Our once pristine well had been deliberately contaminated with a mixture of chemical and biological agents. A small dose might not kill someone outright, but it could sicken many, especially the elderly, children, or animals. Furious, I forwarded the results to my colleagues at the National Water Safety Administration, requesting a covert investigative team. If Karen was behind this, we'd need rock-solid proof before confronting her publicly. Meanwhile, I shared the results discreetly with Mark and a few worried neighbors, advising them to switch to bottled water temporarily. They were aghast. Mark helped me gather older utility logs and well access records. We discovered that Karen, as HOA treasurer, held keys to the well's locked pump house and had authority to schedule maintenance. In fact, she'd arranged a mysterious repair visit after hours 2 weeks prior, exactly when the odor complaints began. That pointed to her potential direct involvement. Though the puzzle pieces aligned, we still lacked direct evidence tying Karen to the contamination. We suspected she used her official access to tamper with the well or reservoir. But to press charges, we needed official confirmation. Time was critical. More families got sick daily. I resolved to escalate quickly. My agency would send a small covert team to gather water samples, checking the well infrastructure. If we caught her meddling again, it would be game over. With each passing day, the situation grew dire. More neighbors fell ill. One older man, already in fragile health, was hospitalized for severe dehydration after ongoing diarrhea. Pets continued suffering, leading the local vet to suspect waterborne toxins. Amid the worry, the reservoir's scenic calm felt like a cruel irony. It had always symbolized the neighborhood's essence. Now it was a hidden threat. Some residents tried boiling water, others purchased expensive filtration devices. But fear overshadowed daily life. Karen, apparently oblivious, or perhaps intentionally downplaying, posted a new HOA letter. She scolded neighbors for spreading panic and threatened fines against anyone defaming the community water system. She demanded that all water testing be done only by the HOA-appointed firm, which she claimed was the sole authorized entity. When a group of mothers confronted her, begging for an independent city test, she sneered that city interference would degrade property values. Tensions soared as her bullying overshadowed public safety. Behind the scenes, my agency's covert investigators arrived under the guise of consultants for the local well maintenance firm. They installed discreet sampling equipment inside the pump house, checking for fresh contamination each day. Meanwhile, I kept my identity as director hidden from the general membership, not wanting Karen to suspect. She might have realized I was an opponent, but likely not that I had national authority backing me. The investigators suspected Karen might return to add more chemicals if the contamination's effect began wearing off. If so, we'd catch her in the act or find new residues pointing to her. The countdown began. If we couldn't get direct evidence soon, we might have to forcibly shut down the well, crippling the entire community. That would cause chaos, but also stop the poisoning. Each hour, the stakes rose. Late one evening, Mark called me in a panic. One neighbor discovered multiple dead fish floating near the reservoir's shore. In the dim moonlight, they saw limp bodies of small aquatic life washed onto the bank. Additionally, ducks that frequented the reservoir seemed to vanish. The water, once crystal, carried a faint film on its surface. This was catastrophic for the local ecosystem, proof the contamination had spread from the well to the reservoir, or vice versa. By dawn, more residents learned of the fish kill. Fear and anger mounted. At a hastily assembled meeting, many demanded the well be shut off. Others looked to Karen for leadership, only to find her dismissive, claiming that fish die-offs happen occasionally. She repeated unsubstantiated claims about runoff from farmland or natural algae bloom. But that contradicted the new chemical markers we had detected. It was appallingly clear the contamination was artificially introduced. The covert investigators I'd summoned tested the reservoir water. They found the same suspicious chemicals as in the well, along with evidence that some toxins had seeped into the broader aquatic environment. Furious, they recommended an emergency order to cease all usage of the well. I agreed wholeheartedly. The lead investigator suggested we do so quietly, giving them one final chance to catch Karen if she tried to tamper again. In the meantime, Mark and I alerted the board that the reservoir was compromised. The board, terrified of lawsuits and health fallout, convened a crisis session without Karen. She was conveniently absent. They voted to shut the well system temporarily and switch to backup municipal supply lines, an emergency measure. The infiltration of toxins was too severe to keep ignoring. We plan to go public with the news soon. People might blame the board for waiting, but better that than more sickness or death. The next night, under cover of darkness, the investigators staked out the pump house. Meanwhile, Mark, I, and a couple of neighbors stood by in a parked car at the reservoir's edge. The plan was to catch Karen red-handed if she arrived with more contaminants. If no one showed, we'd forcibly reveal the contamination data in the morning, along with the well shutdown order. Sure enough, around midnight, a lone figure approached the pump house. The investigators, hidden in the shadows, carefully watched. By the glow of a small flashlight, the intruder unlocked the door, someone with a key. Over a shortwave radio, the team confirmed it was Karen, carrying a plastic container. She knelt by the well's machinery, apparently preparing to pour something into the system. At that moment, the investigators sprang, shining lights and announcing themselves. Karen froze, dropping the container with a gasp. The faint odor of chemicals wafted out. She tried to flee, but they blocked the doorway, demanding she explain her presence. She stammered that she was doing maintenance, but the label on the container indicated an industrial solvent. The investigators identified themselves as agents under the National Water Safety Administration, revealing hidden cameras capturing her actions. Karen's face twisted in fury. At that point, I stepped forward, removing my hood, stating plainly, "Karen, you're under suspicion of deliberately poisoning this community's water supply. I'm Amanda Lewis, director of the NWSA. We've caught you in the act." She reeled as recognition dawned, shock twisting her features. She sputtered, You're? This is a trap. You can't do this. It's my right to protect the neighborhood from that filthy reservoir." But the evidence was incontrovertible. She'd been caught, chemical jug in hand. The investigators promptly alerted local law enforcement, who arrived to arrest Karen on the spot for criminal tampering with a water system, a serious federal offense, especially since it endangered hundreds. Her meltdown was dramatic. She screamed that the reservoir was ruining property values, that neighbors were too noisy, and that she was teaching them a lesson. Some bystanders, awakened by the commotion, watched in horror as the woman who ran their HOA finances was led away in handcuffs, ranting about conspiracies. Morning headlines blasted the news. The entire community reeled, struggling to comprehend that their own HOA official had maliciously introduced toxins to the well, causing real harm to families and wildlife. Once the truth was out, neighbors marched to the HOA office in anger, demanding an immediate board meeting to remove Karen from all positions. The board complied, disclaiming any knowledge of her scheme. People wondered how a single person's vendetta could push them to such extremes. For me, while I felt relief that we'd stopped Karen's sabotage, I also felt anger and sorrow for all who suffered. Dozens had fallen ill, at least one elderly man hospitalized. Pets had died from toxins. The reservoir's ecosystem might take time to recover. Karen's action was beyond petty revenge. It was an atrocity that betrayed the very essence of community living. But the time for reckoning had come. In the days following Karen's arrest, a flurry of official activity ensued. The city declared a public health emergency, ordering all residents to stop using tap water until further notice. My agency, the National Water Safety Administration, worked with the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, and local authorities to conduct thorough decontamination. The well was drained, flushed, and tested repeatedly. The reservoir required delicate remediation efforts to remove chemicals. This forced the entire neighborhood to rely on trucked-in water or bottled supplies for weeks, a massive disruption. The community's fury toward Karen was immeasurable. Families demanded restitution for medical bills and vet costs. Local newscasts labeled her the HOA poisoner, exposing her extremist obsession with controlling the water. The footage of her meltdown at the pump house circulated widely on social media. Even major national outlets covered the story of how a misguided official had tried to sabotage an entire neighborhood's water supply. Meanwhile, the board scheduled a formal recall vote. It passed unanimously, removing Karen from any involvement in Summerview Green's governance. Lawsuits piled up against her. The county prosecutor filed felony charges: tampering with a public water system, reckless endangerment, cruelty to animals, among others. She faced potential decades behind bars. The momentum was unstoppable. As the decontamination continued, a sense of violated trust haunted the neighborhood. People replaced faucets, scrapped contaminated filters, and worried about long-term health effects. The reservoir's once scenic calm felt tainted by the memory of poison. Some families considered moving out, but many resolved to stay, determined to rebuild a safer, more cooperative community. Mark and I volunteered with a newly formed Water Restoration Committee, updating neighbors daily on the cleanup progress. We arranged for free water testing in each household once the well reopened. We also listened to heartbreaking stories: a mother whose baby was hospitalized with a severe rash, a retired couple who lost their cat to toxic ingestion. Their grief mingled with anger at how Karen's personal vendetta harmed innocent lives. On the bright side, the tragedy sparked solidarity. People helped each other with cooking water, offered spare rooms for neighbors who felt uneasy returning home. The community overcame old petty differences, uniting around the shared trauma. The board, thoroughly humbled, vowed transparency moving forward. They invited official city oversight of the water system to prevent future sabotage. The era of letting one HOA member unilaterally manage the well was over. Months later, after an intensive investigation, Karen's trial began under national scrutiny. Prosecutors laid out the grim details of her sabotage: the purchase of industrial chemicals, the infiltration of bacteria cultures, the repeated visits to the pump house at night. Expert witnesses from my agency explained how she'd introduced small but harmful doses over time, enough to sicken residents and kill wildlife, but intended to be slow so as not to raise immediate alarm. Neighbors testified about their illnesses, the heartbreak of losing pets, and the fear that they might never trust their tap water again. The veterinarian described the suffering animals. The local well maintenance staff recounted how Karen blocked attempts at thorough inspections, forging phony paperwork. Even the hidden camera footage from her final act at the pump house sealed her guilt. She had no plausible defense. Karen's attorney offered a feeble argument that she only aimed to discipline neighbors who misused water. But the scale of her crimes was undeniable. The judge, clearly horrified, scolded Karen. "You weaponized our most essential resource, drinking water, because of personal vendettas. It's unconscionable." The jury delivered swift, unanimous guilty verdicts on multiple felony counts: domestic terrorism, as water poisoning can be treated as such, animal cruelty, and public endangerment. Karen's supporters, if any remained, were silent. Meanwhile, the families she harmed watched with grim relief, knowing the legal system had recognized the gravity of her acts. When Karen reappeared for sentencing, she looked haggard, no longer the imperious figure patrolling in a golf cart. The judge's words were biting. "Miss Farnan, your malicious contamination of this neighborhood's water supply represents an extreme violation of public trust. You inflicted physical and emotional harm upon hundreds of residents, risking lives and destroying local wildlife. The law views such conduct akin to a violent assault on the community." He imposed a prison sentence of 15 years, citing aggravating factors like multiple victims, abuse of trust, and the targeted use of toxins. Additionally, her property in Crystal Brook Shores was seized to pay restitution claims. Families could recoup medical bills, property damage, and moral damages. She left the courtroom in handcuffs, a once powerful HOA official undone by her own cruelty. National headlines carried the story, condemning her as an HOA tyrant. The outcome sent a message: messing with water, a fundamental lifeline, would bring down the harshest penalties. My agency's involvement underscored how even small-scale sabotage of water supplies was a matter of national security. Karen's downfall was as total as it was just. Karen's sentencing finally gave Crystal Brook Shores closure. Freed from her toxic influence, the residents united to heal from the trauma. The water system, thoroughly cleaned, resumed normal operation, now under the watchful eye of professional city oversight. Regular testing and advanced security measures at the pump house prevented future tampering. The reservoir's ecosystem slowly revived, fish stocks recovering, birds returning to nest. People rediscovered the joys of daily life. Children splashing in sprinklers, families picnicking near the reservoir's edge, confident their water was safe. The local water maintenance firm, aided by my agency's guidelines, set up educational programs on conservation, ensuring the entire fiasco turned into a learning opportunity about the importance of clean water and vigilant stewardship. No one forgot the horror Karen caused, nor did they rewrite the pain inflicted upon the sick or the grief over lost pets. But they refused to let her legacy define them. Instead, they forged a deeper communal bond. They replaced the old HOA structure with more transparent, democratic procedures, preventing any single zealot from seizing unchecked power again. As for me, I gradually stepped back into a quieter role in the neighborhood, knowing my main job was done. Yet I remained friendly with Mark, Ms. Morgan from the well maintenance firm, and the many neighbors who'd become close friends through adversity. Together, we had proven that an entire community could stand up to an unhinged official determined to harm them. In the aftermath, I penned a formal statement from the National Water Safety Administration praising the resilience of Crystal Brook Shores. It highlighted the importance of local vigilance and the unstoppable drive of neighbors defending their water supply. I commended Mark and others for providing crucial evidence that led to Karen's conviction. The statement also promised continued cooperation. Though the well was privately owned, we'd keep offering resources to ensure no further infiltration ever occurred. The letter was published in the local paper and circulated among water safety professionals, turning the fiasco into a case study. Some communities read about it, realizing how internal sabotage could become a real threat if left unchecked. Meanwhile, I received heartfelt thanks from families whose children recovered from illness or whose pets survived. One mother wrote me that her daughter overcame months of anxious nightmares, comforted by the knowledge that the bad lady who messed with our water is gone. That letter reaffirmed my sense of purpose. I devoted my career to safeguarding water on a national scale, but this crisis reminded me that even a single small neighborhood's water is worth fighting for. The relief in people's hearts was my greatest reward. Months later, summer returned, and with it, signs of a truly reborn neighborhood. The reservoir sparkled under midday sun, children's laughter echoing as they canoed with new, free rentals the board sponsored to celebrate normalcy. The fish population had stabilized, with sightings of new species introduced to replenish the ecosystem. The water's clarity served as a triumphant symbol of how the community overcame Karen's dark sabotage. In place of Karen's controlling presence, fresh volunteer leaders arose, neighbors who believed in open dialogue, respect for nature, and communal well-being. The board organized events like Clean Water Fest, featuring music, local craft booths, and an educational panel by experts from my agency. Mark led tours of the newly secured pump house, explaining how it worked, a transparency measure unthinkable during Karen's reign. The entire vibe of Crystal Brook Shores changed from one overshadowed by intimidation to one guided by shared responsibility. People felt free to decorate yards as they liked, to chat openly at board meetings. Freed from the tyranny of fines for trivial matters, neighbors discovered a cooperative spirit. Many credited the adversity for forging them into a stronger, more cohesive community. Of course, Karen's memory lingered as a cautionary tale. Some new residents heard bits of the story and were aghast at how far an HOA official once went. But the older neighbors, those who lived through the sabotage, rarely spoke her name. Instead, they used phrases like "before the contamination" or "after the meltdown," as if referencing a communal historical event. The remains of her property were sold at auction, the proceeds partially compensating victims. A family who believed in environmental stewardship moved in, planting a pollinator garden in the yard once overshadowed by Karen's suspicious locks and fences. Occasionally, curiosity arose about Karen's fate. She served her sentence in a federal prison, rumored to have no visitors, estranged from any family she had. Whether she felt remorse or maintained her belief that her neighbors deserved punishment was unknown. In a sense, the question no longer mattered. The community had moved on, thriving, cooperating, and cherishing the water system that once nearly destroyed them. One breezy late autumn afternoon, I stood at the reservoir's edge, gazing at the rippling surface that mirrored the reddening sky. Crisp air, a quiet hush broken by the gentle rustle of leaves. I remembered the turmoil that had ravaged this place not so long ago. The sickness, the fear, the heartbreak of losing trust in the very essence of life, water. Now, that fear was replaced by cautious gratitude. Mark joined me, telling me about the upcoming Community Water Awareness Day that the board was planning. He grinned. "We'll have kids do science experiments. They want you to say a few words from your official vantage. They see you as our local hero." I blushed, deflecting the praise. I just did what was right. The real heroes are the neighbors who refuse to let Karen's poison tear them apart. As we parted ways, I felt a renewed sense of hope. If a single misguided individual could wreak havoc, a united community could repel it. And if an entire neighborhood learned the value of water stewardship, perhaps that ripple effect might spread beyond Crystal Brook shores. For me, that was the deeper victory, a reaffirmation that vigilance, empathy, and collective action could safeguard our most precious resources from even the darkest human impulses. Karen ended up imprisoned, her property seized, her life's reputation in tatters, all for her vindictive attempt to control and punish. Crystal Brook shores stood tall as a testament to resilience, cherishing its water with renewed devotion. And I, Amanda Lewis, the director of the National Water Safety Administration, could rest assured that in this corner of the country, the water now truly flowed with safety, trust, and unity.